This computer. Oh, nice. Okay. We're starting now. It is Wednesday night, October 13th, 2021. We had a class on Limud Torah, on Talmud Torah, based upon the writings of Hakham Obadiah Yosef back in 2011. I sent out a link to that class on YouTube this week, and we never continued it for whatever reason. I really would like to move into Halakha Ma'aseh on a regular basis in our classes. I think it's very, very important. And this week I was looking at this topic of Talmud Torah, and not just Talmud Torah, but in fulfilling your obligation of Limud Torah. Most people will think that you could just study any Torah, whatever it may be, and you're fulfilling your obligation. Hakham Obadiah Yosef has a bit of a different view, and it's a very practical view. I think it's very, very important. It definitely resonates with me, and I think it makes a big difference in people's lives. But let's see what he has to say and the sources for it, and then we'll discuss what are the pros and cons. So we're in Hakham Obadiah Yosef's Halachot Olam. We're in the 8th volume, the final volume of Halachot Olam. We're on page 337, Shin Lamed Zayin. And he writes, בעלי בתים, בזמן הזה, שאין להם פנאי ללמוד יותר משעתיים שלוש בכל יום, לא ילמדו אלא הלכה למעשה מתוך השולחן ערוך ונושאי כליו שמפיהם אנו חיים. So, the בעלי בתים, regular people, okay? People like you and I that lead regular lives, go to school, go to work, have various occupations, run a household, and we don't have free time of more than 2 to 3 hours a day. Such individuals, their Torah learning should only be halakha l'ma'aseh from the Shulchan Aruch and from the books and commentaries written regarding the Shulchan Aruch. Shemipihem anu hayim, because that is our life. We live because of their words. Shezehu shoresh ve'ikar halimud b'toratenu kedusha. This is the root and the main gist of limud of our holy Torah. Because we need to know what a Jew needs to do. Ve'enam yos'im kelal yedei haubat mizvat Talmud Torah b'limud ha-mishnah ve'gemara. And such individuals, regular people, only have 2 to 3 hours a day to say Torah. And of course, obviously, they even have less than that. They do not fulfill their obligation of the Missvah of studying Torah whatsoever if they study Mishnah and or Gemara. Major statement. Yeah. Ki en lomdim halakha mipnei Talmud. In other words, you cannot study practical halakha by studying Gemara. And since you do not get practical halakha from the Gemara, your Torah that you studied does not fulfill the obligation of the Missvah of Talmud Torah. So you studied Torah and you did no Missvah. וכן מה שאמרו, כל השונה הלכות בכל יום מובטח לו שהוא בן העולם הבא. היינו הלכות פסוקות. This statement of the Hachamim that we say every morning, כל השונה הלכות בכל יום, okay, that person who learns halachot every day is guaranteed that he is a child of the Olam Haba. You're getting Olam Haba because you fulfilled the Missvah of Talmud Torah, which is practical halakhah, bottom line halakhah. And by studying the Mishnah and the Gemara, that which is not bottom line halakhah, you do not fulfill your obligation and you are not guaranteed ala habba. About halomdim daf yomi bilbad ma Talmud shelanu. Those people that only study every day in, day out, that what they study is daf yomi from our Gemara. Enam yosim baze yedeh hobat mizvat Talmud Torah. These people that study daf yomi every day do not fulfill the obligation of the Missvah of Talmud Torah. Now, again, this is Hakham Obadiah Yosef himself writing this. This is not his son, Rabbi Yitzhak Yosef. This is one of the last things he wrote. This volume, Halachot Olam, volume 8, came out in what year? 2002. Okay? And he's written similar things in earlier works as well. about הלומדים דף יומי בלבד מהתלמוד שלנו אינם יוצאים בזה ידי חובה מצוות תלמוד תורה, שהרי כתב הגאון רבנו מהרי בן מגס, ביוסף בן מגס. He was one of the greatest Hachamim in Andalusian Spain. He was one of the Rishonim. And he writes, שאין בימינו מי שיוכל לפסוק הלכה מפי התלמוד. We do not have people in our days. Talking about his days. Okay, so we're talking about 1,000 years ago. We don't have people that can make a decisive rendering of the law based upon studying Talmud. We can only follow the rulings of the Geonim. And those people who imagine in their own minds that they can come and rule based upon the intensivity of their studying of the Talmud, it's worthwhile to stop such people. Because we have nobody in our generation that is worthy to do such a thing. That's what he says. But somebody who has 4 or more hours a day to study Torah, so somebody who has 4 or more hours a day to study Torah, such a person should spend 3 hours studying practical, bottom line halakha, and anything more than that 3 hours, he can use to study Gemara and Rishonim. This is a tremendous, tremendous statement. Okay? This is not something that, So
why did it go like with, Biden's emails?
Listen, he's telling you 2 to 3 hours, that's all you have a day. And that's what most people don't even have that much. Don't study anything but halakha. Now, remember, Harambam writes as an introduction to the Mishneh Torah. I wrote this because you people don't have time to study Gemara. And you don't understand the Gemara, and you're not going to know what to do with the Gemara. You're not going to know how to live your lives. Harambam already said this. It's not that Hakham Yosef is coming and telling us something we don't know. Harambam said it. He's showing us that Yosef ben Megas said it, or as some people they call it, Rabbi Migash, but it's wrong, it's Megas. So this is a tradition that we have, that halakha is more important than anything else, and the studying of halakha l'ma'aseh is the fulfillment of the obligation of the Missvah of Talmud Torah. Very, very important statement.
Any comments, anyone?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh baruch.
Amen.
Okay, so far everybody's online with this, you're all on board. You like what Yosef has to say, I'm assuming. And even if you don't, we'll discuss that later. Let's look now at the bottom of the page. We're going to look at sources and how he actually, addresses the topic and where he comes up with his conclusion from. That הנה אף של השיר פירש השונה הלכות, משנה ובריאתה, not a beraita, but a bariata, halakha למשה מסיני. Because even though Rashi, in his commentary to this line of shone halachot, studying halachot, tells you it's mishnah and bariata, and that's halakha למשה מסיני. מכל מקום כתב בשאלות תשובות הרשב"ש, שבכלל אומרם כל השונה הלכות בכל יום וכולי, הוא העוסק בחיבור הרמב"ם וזולתו שסדרו דינים מקובסים מדיני התורה דבר דיבור על אופניו. So the Rashbesh said that it's not just Mishnah or Bariata, okay, which would be technically should be the bottom line halakha, but as time evolved, it's no longer the bottom line halakha. It would be somebody who toils in the writing of halakha of the Rambam and others like the Rambam that actually arranged the dinim in groupings from all the laws of the Torah, everything addressing a particular subject, a particular topic. וכתב בספר המנהיג, דסגה בשתי הלכות בכל יום. And Sefer HaManhig tells you it's enough as long as you do 2 halachot each day. וכן כתב בתשובת הרשב"ש הנזכרת לעיל. וכן הסכים מרן החידה בברכי יוסף אור החיים, ולאפוקה ממה שכתב בעיון יעקב סופרידה, שצריך לומר 100 הלכות דלתא. וכן כתב מרן החידה בספר דבש לפי. So, first thing they're talking about is what is Kol HaShoneh Halachot? Is it Mishnah and Bariata? Or does it have to be something like the Rambam? So he seems to be following the opinion that it has to be more practical groupings of halachot like the Rambam and others like him, or Shulchan Aruch obviously as well. And the question is, how many halachot? Since this verse of the Hakamim says, Kol HaShoneh Halachot, this is a verse of the Hakamim in Masechet Niddah, is it just 2 halachot? Or does it have to be 100 halachot? Or there is basically no limit to the amount of halachot. This is where we are so far. ונראה שאין יוצאים ידי חובה תלמוד תורה בלימוד אגדות בלבד. I don't know where he comes all of a sudden, how many years long goes, and it seems, okay, but it's more than just seems. It's in all likelihood, that's what it looks like. You do not fulfill the obligation of the Talmud Torah by studying Agadot alone. Agadot, stories, fables, ma'asim. كده أمرنا بيروشلمي شيئين لمدين هلاخا من أجادو. Why? Because the Yerushalmi tells you straight out. Why do you not fulfill your obligation by studying Midrashim? Because you cannot learn halachot from Midrashim. So automatically, that statement alone tells you what is the Missvah of Talmud Torah? Halakha. If the Yerushalmi is telling you that you cannot learn halachot, it's telling you clearly, we do not learn halakha from Agadot. Therefore, you cannot fulfill your obligation of Talmud Torah by the reading of Agadot and studying Agadot. That means that you must learn halakha. Period. ואף על פי שמהר"ש חיות כתב שגם על אגדה נופל שם הלכה, even though מהר"ש חיות says that the heading of halakha can fall upon אגדה, מכל מקום בדין זה צריך לומר halakha mamash. When we're dealing with this, we're dealing with a law, and the law therefore requires actual halakha. כדי ללמוד halakha l'ma'aseh, because you must learn practical halakha, halakha that you can put into use. And all the more so based upon what the Hakham Sofer wrote, and the Hakham Sofer clearly writes that Agada is not part of halakha. عين شم. וכן העלה בשל תשובות חסד יהושע גרינוולד, בעיטה בירושלמי, רבי לוי דרש, כתיב, איש אשר ייתן לו האלוהים עושר ונכסים וכבוד, ואיננו חסד לנפשו מכל אשר יתאווה. So there's a pasuk in Kohelet, okay? Person that Borei Olam gives him عشر, he gives him nechasim, he gives him chabod, and he's not lacking anything. How is this pasuk explained? Osher is the Mikra, okay? The Bible, the Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Osher. Nechasim, okay, are the halachot, and the kabod is the Tosefta. ואיננו חסר לנפשו מכל אשר יתאווה, אלו משניות של רבי חייא ורבי הושעיה, ומשנתו של בר כפרה, ולא ישלימנו האלוהים לאכול ממנו. זהו בעל אגדות, שאינו לא אוסר ולא מתיר, לא מטמא ולא מטהר, כי איש נוכרי יאכלנו, זה בעל התלמוד. So now it's giving a very nice, interesting derash on this pasuk from Kohelet, is what each thing may or may not be, and what you fulfill, and what value you get out of it. Come Rabbi Abba bar Kahana, v'nashkeh al nasheh. So Rabbi Abba bar Kahana comes and kisses him on the forehead. Amar lo, zachita memirana yakim. Why? Ki haya talmid sa'ir v'rach b'shanim v'amra me'amid. Why? Because all of a sudden they had this young student, and the young student, and he was also young in age. So he was young in studying Torah, and he was also young in age. And he got up to say what he had to say. Tizkeh mimrena yetib. Okay, you're going to have the zechut because you made such a beautiful statement that you're going to be an old person studying Torah. In other words, you're going to be a Rosh Yeshiva. And you're going to sit in the Beit Midrash, you're going to sit. When you have the Hacham in the Beit Midrash, he would sit and the Talmidim would stand. So you're going to be able to sit down and say such things in front of all the Talmidim of the Beit Midrash. Ubi Gemara b'Baba Tram, Amar Rabba, May Dichtib, Masiya Abanim, Yasab Bahim. Elu Ba'alim Mishnah, Sheshone Mashniyot Kol Hayom, Ve'enu Yodei Lefarasham Kiraui, Ve'enu Illa Sa'ash Mitkashe B'Ta'amehim. Okay, you have somebody who just Masiya Abanim Yasab Bahim, say somebody who has a bunch of stones, precious stones, okay, like thick diamonds, emeralds, rubies, pearls. But he doesn't understand the value of them. He's not happy with them. Not only he's not happy with them, Yasab Bahim, he's going to be sorry with them. He's going to be sad with them. He doesn't know what he has in his hands. He doesn't know what to do with them. Because these are people that only study Mishnah. They know how to just recite Mishnayot, but they don't understand the Mishnayot, and they don't know the practicality of the Mishnayot. Bokeh Asim Iska, say Ba'al Gemara, okay? Lashon Hamim, okay, Bokeh Asim Iska, the Lashon of Hamimut, it's a sharpness, Ftihir and Mea Sochenet, okay? Yeah, it warms you up, but after you warm up, then you're too hot, and then you want to walk away from it. Okay, that's the studying of Gemara. Okay, you warm up, and then, okay, let's go. So you have all different sodot in the agadot. And in the Ein Yaakov, which is the midrashic elements of the Talmud, all those parts are extracted out. Now, obviously, he's just coming to show how the Hachamim in the Gemara and how the Hachamim that explained the Pesukim in Kohelet viewed the different facets of Torah. Okay, and obviously what he's telling us over here is not Halakha Ma'aseh, all of this, but he's just trying to give you an idea of what's going on and how the Hachamim viewed Agadah, how they viewed Halakha, how they viewed Mishnah, how they viewed Gemara, how they viewed Mikra, etc. וכמו שאמרו בספרי, כי אם שמור תשמרו את כל המצווה, שלא תאמר, הרי למדתי הלכות דייג. תלמוד לומר את כל המצווה, לימוד מדרש, הלכות והגדות. Well, okay, now I studied all by halachot, I'm done. I don't have to study anything else ever again. No. Now you study the halachot, you're done with the halachot, that's when you go on to study the midrash and the agadot and everything else. וכן הוא אומר, כי לא על הלחם לבדו יחיה האדם, לרבות מדרש. Because you have to have midrash. You need the stories. You need, those, the Agadaic literature to help you put things into focus, to help you channel in, to allow you to apply things at times, or to teach others and to give those parables that will connect people. It's also very important. And you need it for yourself also. Sometimes
it closes gaps. It closes a gap in the back.
Sometimes it closes a gap, but sometimes it's what helps to make the connection. Sometimes people, you can give them a dry halakha and they don't connect to it. You need to give them a story to make them understand it, and so to make them connect to it and want to, do the same thing. היינו דברי חז"ל על מדרשי המקרא, ספרה במחילתה. The same way the Hachamim themselves created midrashim on the Pesukim of the Torah. Right? We have the Sefra, they have the Sefre, they have the Mechilta, etc. כי על כל מוספי אדוני, אלו הלכות והאגדות, עליהם יחיה האדם. Because we live on all of them. We need everything, all the different facets of the writings of the Hachamim. ודורשי אגדות אומרים, לשונך להכיר את מי שאמר והיה העולם. If you want to really know the person, or the being rather, that created the world, in other words, if you really want to get to know Hashem, you want to get to know Borei Olam, limod Agadah. For that, you need to study Agadah. שמתוך כך אתה מכירו מדבק ממידותיו בדרכיו. By studying the Agadot, and again, not just reading a story, by studying the Agadot and understanding the Agadot and what intention the Hachamim had and what message they wanted to give us, that causes us to cling to God in a greater fashion. ובעבוד רבי נתן מי שלמד אגדה לא טעם מימיו טעם יראת חטא. First, according to Abot of Rabbi Natan, right, we have Pirkei Avot, and we also have something called Abot Rabbi Natan, a parallel book to Pirkei Avot. And over there he says, anybody who never studied Agadot never tasted the taste of the fear of the sin. And we know it. It's a very powerful statement. And our Hachamim, all of them, Sephardim and Ashkenazim, doesn't make a difference. They all used some sort of Agadah to begin a topic, to begin a speech, Obviously, it had to be connected. It couldn't be just, okay, give you a story and now we'll move on to our topic of the day. It always had to have a connection. And they always began with some sort of Agadah, either an Agadah that was written by the Rishonim or by the Tanaim, the Amoraim, something from the Mechilta especially, or even, let's say, from Midrash Tanhuma, or if they didn't find something befitting, they actually used a story that they encountered, and they felt that it would drive home the message as well. Ubtimura, ביוחנן וריש לקיש מעייני בספרד אגדתה בשבת, שנאמר עת לעשות אדוני הפרו תורתך, ובפרט מן החכמים המופיע בפני הציבור ומשפיע עליהם להדבק בסור מחשבתם עליו ללמוד אגדות למשוך לבעם. Tells you right here, especially תלמידי החכמים that present themselves in front of the kahal, in front of the sibur. Any rabbi that's getting up to speak in front of the people must be connected to the agadot, because that's the way he's going to be able to draw in the people. וכמו שכתוב בסוטה, רבי אבהו ורבי חייא בר אבא, הקליעו له אתרא. רבי אבהו דרש אגדתה, רבי חייא בר אבא דרש שמעתתה. Okay, so you had two hachamim, Rabbi Abhu and Rabbi Hiya. These two Hachamim were invited to go to a particular place. And Rabbi Abu gave a speech of Agadah, speech of stories, of Midrashim. And Rabbi Hayya gave a speech of Shama'ata. Shama'ata is basically Halachot and Dinim, things of Isur v'Heter. In other words, one gave, something that's easy for people to listen to, and one gave a very, very, detailed and difficult halakha discourse. Okay, what happened to the people? The people all flocked to one Hakham and away from the other Hakham. Okay, so now what?
Gathering?
Yeah. Okay.
That's an interesting way of saying it.
So okay, Halash Da'atil Bihaya. Now Bihaya, he got a little melancholy. He got upset. Okay, Halash Da'atil, his mind got weak. In other words, he got in a melancholic stance and mood. Who told him, let me tell you a mashal. Okay, two people came to a city. One is selling diamonds and precious gems. Something cheap. I don't know what sadkit is, but it's something demehim kalim. In other words, it's very, very cheap. Who does everybody come running to? Not the guy who's selling the cheap junk. Okay, something that nobody wants. Everybody wants to see the fancy jewels, right? Whether they're buying them or not, they're coming to him first. They want to see what's going on. Anybody who's telling stories, people are going to come, run and listen. And we see it in our days as well. Because Agadah doesn't need, in-depth study. Anybody could say it any place, any time, and people are going to listen. People like stories. It's easy. Okay, when you actually study the story, it's that Shan that knows how to explain the story properly. That's a whole different story. But you want to reel the people in, you're using the story. Shulchan Aruch الجراز شدراشات الجدو يحشو بخلال شليش بالمشنى. So according to the Hasidim, okay, in their Shulchan Aruch, okay, the Gaon Rabbi Zalman, he tells you that the derashot of the Agerot is considered a third of Mishnah. All right. Talmud Yosef now gave this whole introduction, which seems to be completely disconnected from everything we studied on top.
I was going to say, this is a sidebar, but it's a strange one.
He's got to develop the point.
You know what I mean? Like he's saying halakha, something you missed the beginning part. That if you have 2 hours a day to study, you should be
2
studying
to 3
halakha.
hours. 2 to 3
hours. You should be spent studying halakha
Only.
like Missvah Torah, Shulchan Aruch.
Right.
But now, if you have 4 hours, then you study most of it.
If you have up to 3 hours, you only study Torah. Torah meaning halakha. I'm saying if you want to fulfill the obligation of Missvah Talmud Torah, you must study practical halakhah. Okay. If you have 4 or more hours to study Torah a day, 3 hours for halakha must study halakha ma'aseh, and then you could start studying Gemara after that. And or anything else, obviously. And anybody who has only 2 to 3 hours a day, and that person studies, and obviously we're talking about even if you have less than that, let's say you have an hour a day, and you study Daf Yomi, you do not fulfill your Missvah of Talmud Torah.
He mentioned Daf Yomi.
He said specifically Daf Yomi.
Put in quotes.
It's right there. Go back and look at it.
So this whole thing is interesting. I don't know where. Let's see where it's going.
Let's see where he's going now. You'll see now.
Stressing the importance of Agadah.
Yeah.
He's stressing the importance of Agadah to draw people in. So let's say somebody's going to be teaching Halachot, okay? You need to know how to bring them in. And I'm going to show you how and why, and how Agadot can be used. The word Agadah can be used in different ways, and not just a regular story. שבזמננו נכון ללמוד יותר בשולחן ערוך והאחרונים, מפני שכמה הלכות רבו הפוסקים החולקים על הרמב"ם, ואף מרן שולחן ערוך נטה קו להכריע כמותה. And goes, even though we said earlier the importance of, right before the Rashbesh, so the importance of studying, practical halakhah, halakha pisuka from Harambam. What you're telling us now is it would seem in our days it's proper to study more in Shulchan Aruch and in the Aharonim, people after the Shulchan Aruch, okay? Because a number of halachot, there are those who differed and disagree with Harambam. And even Maran Shulchan Aruch at times sided with them against Harambam. And therefore you should study Shulchan Aruch more than studying Harambam. Ve'anu kibbalnu horaot Maran ben Haked ben Ahmir. And as we know, Hakham Obadiah Yosef has said this more than countless times, that we have accepted upon ourselves the rulings of Maran, whether they are lenient, whether they are strict. But now, what do we see when we say is the Rosh? Now we said we mentioned the Rambam before, or the Rosh is another one of our Shilosha Amudei Hora'ah. What does the Rosh say? שכתב, שכל המורים הרעות מתוך דברי הרמב"ם ואינם בקיאים בגמרא, לידע מהיכן הוציא דבריו, טועים להתיר האסור לאסור המותר, כי הוא כתב ספרו בלי טעם וראיה, והקורא בו חושב שהוא מבין דבריו, ואינו כן, שאם אינו בקיא בגמרא לא יבין דבר אשורו לאמיתו, ויחשד בדין בהוראה. What does the Rosh come and tell us? Now the Rosh came after the Harambam. Okay, Harambam passed away in 1204. The Rosh was, approximately late 12s, maybe 1296. And he tells us, anybody who dictates to you a law just by reading Harambam, and they are not proficient and well-versed in the Gemara to know where the Rambam drew his laws and conclusions from, they are making a mistake, because they can easily cause somebody to make a sin. In other words, that he will tell them to do something that is permissible when it's really forbidden, or something that's forbidden when it's permissible. Because Harambam wrote his work without giving any reasons and without giving any sources. And somebody who reads it thinks he understands what he's saying, but he really does not understand what he's saying. Because if you understand the Gemara, can you understand everything perfectly in the writings of Harambam? And anybody who rules directly from the Rambam, he is only causing people to err.
Whoa.
This,
as I said, he's causing people to err.
Who's the source for this? I'm sorry.
This is the Rosh, the Ben Asher, originally from Franco, Germany, and then he became the rabbi in northern Spain, more specifically in Toledo. And the rulings of the Rosh permeated all of Christian Spain, even later on getting down to even southern Andalusian Spain. And at the time of the expulsion from Spain by 1492, all the Spanish Jews really felt that the Rosh was the Marad Atra, He was their rabbi and their ruler, and most of Spanish Jewry in Spain was following Halachot al Pi Harosh, and they took those Halachot with them when they left Spain as well. And we see that clearly in the writings of Rabbi Yosef Karo in his introductions, as well as in the Beit Yosef, as well as in his responsive literature, the Abkat Rochel. So it's very, very well known.
Okay.
Yeah. So is this part of the movement anti-Harambam? I don't want to go in that direction or not that direction, because again, he's not knocking Harambam. He is knocking somebody who rules based upon only reading the Mishneh Torah without having the background knowledge. Okay, if you have the background knowledge, he has no problem with you ruling according to Harambam. Now remember, Harambam, in his introduction, clearly said, I'm writing this for you because you cannot have the background knowledge. So Harambam's intention in writing the Mishneh Torah.
Once for the average person, and once for the more learned, should go into the Gemara.
Right, but
Most people should just be using it.
He's claiming.
Right, but they're also saying no.
Right.
they're also saying no. Harambam himself, though, felt the way he wrote his book was meant to be a very clear, orderly fashion for anybody to know what to do. Now, I'll be honest.
Didn't he, I mean, when he wrote it, he says, it's pretty clear. He said, and the reason I'm writing it for you this way is so that you will not need to pick up any other book.
Yes.
And you'll just be able to understand. He was pretty clear. It's not like he was wavering when he wrote that.
Very clear, very, very clear. But I will be honest with you, at times I have picked up Harambam and I wasn't able to figure out what he wanted to say. Most of the time, I have no problem. But sometimes in certain areas of halakha that I don't have background knowledge, I found it difficult to know. And I had to consult other sources to have that background knowledge to understand the Harambam and what he's really trying to say. So I see where the Rosh is coming from. I have a difficulty with his blanket statement, but I understand how it can come into play.
Interesting how he quotes it.
Well, let's see where he's going with it.
Yeah, it's still.
Okay, so you have to understand. First, he told us over here, Hakham Obadiah Yosef, follow Shulchan Aruch. Now he's telling you one of the reasons possibly why you shouldn't follow Harambam, right? Or why people
Without
may
background.
argue what?
Wait, no. I'm saying what?
Or no, David. First, he tells you follow Shulchan Aruch, don't follow Rambam. It's like you don't follow Rambam. He goes, but if you want to learn, practical daily halakha, study Shulchan Aruch, because there are those who differ with the Rambam, including the Shulchan Aruch himself, who at times differs. Now he brings us the Rosh, one of the Shilosha Amudei Hora'ah, which makes us understand why somebody like Shulchan Aruch would not go hand in hand with with the writing or with the law as laid down in Mishneh Torah. Okay, so we'll make that clear. נראה כיצד דלא כתשובת הרשב"ש הנזכרת לעיל, right? If we remember on the first page we read, on the very first column on the bottom, we quoted the Rashbesh. It says that studying Harambam. So he's saying, obviously the Rosh and the Rashbesh did not see eye to eye on this. הואיל ואין זה בכלל הלכות פסוקות מכיוון שאינו מבין דבר לאושרו ולאמיתו ויכשל בדין ובהוראה. So you're not going to understand everything fully and you're going to end up giving faulty rulings. אולם יש לומר שלאחר שהרב המגיד והכסף משנה ושאר האחרונים הראו מקורות דבריו והסבירו טעמו ונימוקו יוצאים בזה ידי חובת שונה הלכות. Now, in our average Mishneh Torah that we have today, okay, not the one volume Mishneh Torah that I bring to the table at times when we have class, but our regular sets of Mishneh Torah, we have in them, we have the Magid Mishneh, and we have the Kesef Mishneh, and we have others on the page, and they have all explained the sources for Harambam's Halachot. They quote us the Gemarot, they show us the different opinions over there. So if you're going to study the Harambam with the Magid Mishneh and the Kesef Mishneh, there's no problem then, because you're getting the background information that you need. Okay? They show the source for what Harambam is ruling, and they explain his reasoning and his insight. Now you fulfill your obligation of Shonei Halachot, of studying Halachot. לעניין דברי מרן השולחן ערוך, שאף על פי מהרשע, שאף על פי שהמהרשע בחלק ראשון כתב שבדורות הללו שמורים הלכה מתוך השולחן ערוך, שמורים הלכה מתוך השולחן ערוך, ואינם יודעים טעם העניין, אם לא ידקדקו תחילה בתלמוד, טעות נופל בהוראתם, והרי הם בכלל מבלי עולם ויש לאכול בהם. Now, we have a problem. We're telling you rule according to Shulchan Aruch, but Maharsha is telling you, no, you can read Shulchan Aruch and you can make the same mistakes. You don't know the source. You don't know the reason behind it. You know, you may not understand it fully, and now you're going to rule inconclusively or accidentally or mistakenly, and you have the same problem. And people who do this, we also have to reprimand them. מכל מקום בזמננו שזכינו לאחרונים שביררו ולבנו והסבירו הדברים בטוב טעם ודעת שאפילו דמה לפסוק מתוך שולחן ערוך. Someone is telling us, but no, in our days that we've had so many Aharonim that have written on the Shulchan Aruch, and they've clarified every last iota in the Shulchan Aruch in a way that everybody can understand, we could definitely feel at ease ruling upon Shulchan Aruch. And that's what's written in the Pethet Shubah. And the Radbaz wrote something similar. Also wrote that. Also as well. שהרמב"ם עצמו סביר עליה שיש להורות מתוך חיבורו בלבד. See, the Geraz is telling you that the Harambam himself, right, as Jason just said before, Harambam said, no, I made my book so every person be able to rule and know the Halakha based upon exactly what's in this book, the Mishneh Torah, alone and nothing else. וכמו שכתב להדיא בהקדמתו, שעשאו בכדי שלא יצטרכו לשום חיבור אחר בעולם. And like Harambam wrote in the introduction, he wrote this book so no person will ever need any other work in the world. This is it, the one and only. In other words, you have your Torah, Nevi'im, Ketubim, Mishneh Torah. That's it, nothing else. שהאדם קורא בתורה שבכתב תחילה, ואחר כך קורא בחיבור זה, ויודע ממנו תורה שבעל פה כולה. ואינו צריך לקרות ספר אחר ביניהם. You read the Pesukim of the Torah, then you open up over here, and this is your Torah שבעל פה, and this is it, you're done. You don't need any other work in between, before or after. וזה שלא כמו שכתב הראש בתשובה. This is obviously not like what the Rosh said in that Shubha that we read before. ומה שאמרו בסוטה, שהמורים הלכה מתוך משנתם, הרי הם בני עולם. סביר עליה להרמב"ם, כפירוש השני של רש"י, שהוא מפני שמשניות או ברייתות, הרבה אמרינן בהו, ها من ربي بلونه بيحدائه بيديت الختاة كبته. Because now, when you have somebody who's just studying the Mishnah or a Sugya of Gemara, and you don't know everything, and then you're just going to rule based upon that, that could be one of a number of places where this is discussed in the Gemara, and you're not aware of that. So now you're ruling according to this. Or maybe you just saw the section that one Hakham is giving his opinion, and you're going to see the other Hakham give their opinion later on, and you don't know that yet. And therefore, if you're going to rule based upon Gemara, you don't have everything in front of you, and you don't know everything.
Years later.
Hmm?
You
It
could be
could.
learning it years
Many,
later.
or you may never learn it.
Yeah.
You may never get up to it. Therefore, these people who give rulings, yes, it's very easy to understand why they could be making such mistakes. And this does not apply when you're learning the Mishneh Torah, because Harambam studied it all, gathered it all, collated it all, organized it all, and laid it out for you in a fashion that you have everything in front of you based upon all the opinions of what is the bottom line halakha, and and the ruling from the Hachamim of the Gemara. Ayin Shah. V'ayin b'Sefer Hasidim. Sefer Hasidim is a very interesting work. How would you even begin to explain Sefer Hasidim? Just look it up. Honestly, just look it up. It's a work that has so many various abstract things, but sometimes it's the only source for it. And it's something that was written, I believe, in the 1300s, if I'm not mistaken. You have it over there?
Germany, right?
Germany, as far as I know, yes. Anyway, so Sefer Hasidim is bringing a quote from Tehillim. Okay? Ashrei ish yireh et Adonai b'mitzvotav hafez me'od. Okay? B'mitzvotav hafez me'od. In his mitzvot, he is greatly seeking. Elu piskei halachot. This is piskei halachot. This is bottom line rulings of halakha. Shekasher yabod lidei ma'aseh yeda' im le'asor or le'hatir. Because when you come down to the bottom line, nitty-gritty, you're going to know whether it's going to be forbidden or going to be permissible. Also in Tehillim, okay, to do your will, God, that's what I would desire. Sefer Hasidim, later on, right, كتاب تلبيهم למדים שלא ייתכן ללמד מסכתות שהם הלכתה למשיחה לאותם שלא למדו מסכתות השייכים להם להורות בתוכם למעשה בכל יום. Because which Gemarot are you going to start teaching? Once you start teaching people Gemarot, and you're teaching whether it's, their children or whether they're teenagers or they're adults, okay, which Gemara are you going to teach them first? Which one do they need more? Which one don't they need? Which one do they need to understand another Gemara? It's impossible. You'll never get anywhere, because somebody who wants to study the Gemara or teach the Gemara to start teaching people Halachot, or so people can learn Halachot, the person is always going to be confused. It cannot be done. It's very important. Watch what the Shach, if this is the part that I remember that I was reading before. The Shach is Siftei Kohen, which is one of the most important commentaries on the Yoreh De'ah, and famous Ashkenazi. كتاب الدريشة יש בעלי בתים שנוהגים ללמוד בכל יום תלמוד עם רש"י ותוספות. Right? Are regular people who are accustomed to studying every day Talmud, in other words, Gemara, with Rashi and Tosafot. ואינם לומדים בפוסקים, but they don't learn Halakha למעשה. They don't learn practical Halakhah. ומביאים ראיה ממה שאמרו. And they bring proofs from what they said, שכל השונה הלכו בכל יום מובטח לו שהוא בן העולם הבא. אבל האמת היא שצריכים ללמוד בספרי הפוסקים דיני התורה הלכה למעשה, כמו הריף והראש ודומיהן. But in actuality, these people need to be studying in works of halakha, like the Rif and the Rosh and other similar works. Shizehu shoresh ve'ikar letoratenu, because this is the roots and the main gist of our Torah. Ve'enam yos'im yedei hawba kelal b'limud Talmud. And they do not fulfill their obligation whatsoever by studying Talmud. This is the Siftei Kohen, the Shach saying this.
Right.
Go tell any yeshiva student in the world, the Shach said something that, they all know him. You don't, because all the yeshiva students, they study Isur Veheter. Okay, because when you first become a rabbi, generally the first thing is Isur Veheter. You learn laws of kashrut about meat, and about dairy, and about the kitchen, and about shechita. These are all basics to get your first rabbinical semicha. And you cannot study any of that without every 2 seconds you're going to study something, and you have to see what the Shach, the Siftei Kohen, says. So he's well known throughout the world. Any rabbi in the world has heard of him, any junior rabbi, any student, anybody considering even going to yeshiva has heard of the Shach. He told the Shach said, you do not fulfill your obligation whatsoever by studying Talmud. Go tell him the Shach said that. And only somebody who has a lot of time to learn. Somebody who has like 9 hours a day to study, okay? Yilmod b'Talmud. Only that person should be studying Talmud. Guy who has 9 hours a day. You know what that is? No, you have a day off. About Ba'alei Batim, regular people who get up and go to work, okay? Put in a hard day's living. People can only learn 3 to 4 hours a day, okay? They should not learn only Talmud. This is his words in a nutshell.
I wish I could learn 3 to 4 hours a day.
Exactly. We all do. We all do. We're lucky if we get in 1 hour a day sometimes. Okay, but basically, Hakham is paraphrasing him, and he's abridging what he had to say. Okay, so the Geraz, we said Rabbi Zalman in his Shulchan Aruch, this is basically the Shulchan Aruch of the Hasidim, says the same thing. She'adam she'en lo penai harbe, a person who doesn't have too much free time, sarich sheyeh kol limudo b'limud hadinim hamibi'im de'dei ma'aseh. All his learning must be studying laws that he can put to use. Okay? Laws. They don't deal with Torah Shebechtav. We'll get to that after. Shehem halachot hasirichot lechol adam lada'avotam. These are the halachot every person needs to know. Kedei lekayeh hamizvot. To know the mizvot and to fulfill the mizvot. Ulizaher shelo leachshil bi'isurim halil rahaz. And so they can be careful not to make any sort of transgressions. Dehainu b'Shulchan Aruch or Hayim k'ma'at kullo. In other words, you have to learn all of Shulchan Aruch or Hayim, practically the whole thing. Okay, because that applies to everybody every day. That's all your laws of Shahrit, Minha, Abid, Shibbat, holidays, etc. Talit, Tiflin, etc. Ume'at Yorede'ah, and you have to learn certain sections of Yorede'ah, would deal with the Kashrut and Nida and things like that. Ume'at be'Ibn Aizer. Ibn Aizer has to do with marriage and divorce. Be'Hoshim Mishpat, having to do with business. Okay, so you need to study all the applicable areas. All Halakha birura b'ta'ama al pi Beit Yosef. All the halachot have to be clear and concise with their understanding and reasoning based upon the Beit Yosef. In other words, based upon Beit Yosef Karo, Ayin Shah. And this is what the Geraz is saying, which is the main book of Halakha for Hasidim. V'zeh toref debrei ha'teshuvah me'ahaba b'petiha le'chelik bet. And basically the same thing, coming from the Teshuvah Me'ahaba in his introduction. He tells, V'zeh ha'shulchan asher lifnei Adonai samuna elo shemona elo Shulchan Aruch or Hayim. Its name is so befitting. It's a set table. It's a way of life. Asher bo כל התנהגות והדינים אשר יעשה אותם האדם וחי בהם. This is everything a person needs to do so he can live by it. ובו הלכתה, רבתה, שבתה, וברכות, הנהנים, ויתר הלכות. And this is all the halachot of every day, of Shabbat, of berachot, everything that you need. ולא כאשר ראיתי כמה מההמון שלומדים בכל יום דף גמרא, ואינם יודעים דיני ברכות הנהנים והלכות שבת. Because this is so different than what I see from the masses who every day study a page of Gemara and they don't know the berachot. Ask him, here's a pineapple, what do you say? I don't know. You know, here's a bowl of oatmeal. What do you do with it? What's the beracha Aharonim? I don't know. You know, Halachot Shabbat, they let us sweep the house. I don't know. They don't know because all they're studying is Gemara. It's not Halakha l'ma'aseh. Ve'enam yod'im dinei berachot enheni v'chot Shabbat. You have to know berachot and you know Halachot Shabbat, and they don't know it. Moshe katab b'shach yorede'ah. As we mentioned before, the Shach said so. Shebechol kayoseh bazeh srichim l'lmod poskim. Everything you do, you must learn the poskim. עד כאן תוכן דבריו. וכן כתב הגאון רבנו יהונתן אייבשיץ בספר יערות דבש. כי מי שלא למד הלכות שבת על בוריים פעמיים שלוש, לא יוכל להימלט שלא יקרה לו חילול שבת, הן בדאורייתא והן דרבנן. Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz, who was a great Aharon, and his name obviously is very, very well known as well. Because anybody who didn't study Halachot Shabbat in depth at least 2 to 3 times, he's telling you in depth at least 2 to 3 times, it's impossible that this person will not make a transgression on Shabbat. Guaranteed, such a person is going to make Hilul Shabbat some way, somehow. And it may be something d'oraita, and it may be something d'rabbanan, but it's guaranteed. Because that's how intricate and complex and detailed are Halachot Shabbat. So how can you not study them? Tell me how many people study them, do you know? Do you know people that study Halachot Shabbat regularly? Do you know classes of Halachot Shabbat? Yeah?
I think there are. Sure.
Yeah, where? Tell me.
I'm informed and I'll get back to you. but
Get
there
back to me. I don't think so. There may have been at times here and there, but regularly, because this is something that you can never really stop technically. וכתב על זה הגאון מליסה בדרך החיים, ועל זה ידבו כל הדאבים, כי יש כמה מפלגים בתורה שעוסקים בש"ס בפלפול ובחריפות, ואילו בהלכות שבת אינם בקיאים באים לידי ספק חילול שבת. Because there are great Hachamim, great rabbis, people who know Shas inside and out, up and down, every pilpul, okay? But go ask them Practical Halakhah of Halachot Shabbat, they have no idea.
The Rabbi Badi story.
Okay, yeah.
What's the-
Tell them the story. No, tell them. No, it fits right now. David, say it.
Yeah, cool.
What?
Tell the story.
I don't know the details. You know the details.
So he's one of the
You in Lakewood.
one of the main guys, Rabbi Aaron Cotton's main student, and someone asked him halakha, and he didn't know how to answer the question. And he went crazy. He was like, I learned so much. I'm the #1 student, and I can't answer a simple question of halakha, that he just revised his whole learning technique and only went into halakha.
Because practical halachot, it's an issue of merit. He realized what's more important. You have to know it. And we said before, why you been because you're following halakha properly. If you're following halakha properly, you're going to gain that reward of halakha. If you don't follow halakha properly, you're making mistakes left and right, and you're making averot. You're making averot constantly. You're not going to get the halakha. It's quite simple. He concludes over here, Hakham Yosef says, "V'chein hibiam hagdaon b'chayim palachi b'sefer kaf ha'chayim v'chein katav dan b'zichronot Eliyahu tabid yomani v'chein katav hagdaon ba'al mishnah berura b'akdamato l'chot Shabbat yishma Hakham Yosef lekach." Because all Hachamim, all the Rabbanim, Sephardim, Ashkenazim alike, they all wrote the importance of studying halakha l'ma'aseh, halakha pisuka, and how you can't, put aside halakha pisuka to study Gemara. So the Gemara, you're not going to be able to learn practical halakha. This is why he doesn't want you to be studying Daf Yomi. If you finished your halakha pisuka for your 3 hours a day, go study Gemara afterwards. There's no problem with that. But he wants you to know halakha. Even if you study it, you have somebody like Rabbi Yonatan Eibishitz is telling you, Hilchot Shabbat, you have to study it at least 2-3 times. And after a few years, things that didn't come up in your practical life, you're going to forget. I know many people who study Hilchot Basar Behalab, and they know Halachot of the kitchen because many women ask them questions. And every few years, they study it all from scratch as well. You have to, because so many different intricacies come up, and you have to be, really, really, sharp in all those details. So halakha pisuka, halakha l'ma'aseh, studying the Missvah of Talmud of Harambam, studying the Rosh, studying the Rif, studying Shulchan Aruch, studying all the Aharonim, it's very, very important. And this is really, David asked about what important, about Mikra. The Mikra we dealt with in the class in 2011. Okay, so go back and listen to it, and you'll see about the Mikra.
I'm halfway re-listening.
Yeah, it was a good class.
There's a couple of things I don't understand. They charge to learn. That's the first question. So they wouldn't let you in if you didn't have money. Number two, how about nothing bad could happen to you if you're doing a mitzvah like that? So he says you're not allowed to put yourself engaged when you're doing a mitzvah. It's the opposite of like maybe the guy $1 when he's going to Israel. And all that.
You can't do that.
So it's like it's totally opposite of what we learn.
Right.
So there's a lot of,
There's a lot of things there. There's a lot of different things. But so here's the thing now. We saw what Hakham Obadiah Yosef is telling us over here. And our class, for the most part, we deal with halakha l'ma'aseh, but we deal with a specific question or a topic. And I'm sure we're going to keep doing that because things come up that we want to investigate, we want to study. But I want to really move into more of a halachic track, if you will, if everybody's on board with it. And I think a good way of doing it is by doing Ben Ish Hai, because really Ben Ish Hai really revolutionized halakha in the Sephardic world, and for good and for bad, both in the way it's studied as well as the way it's practiced. And I want to look at Hakham Obadiah Yosef's rebuttal of it's fun and it's practical. Not only in Halachot Olam, in other places as well. Okay, before Halachot Olam came out, you see things written by Hakham Obadiah Yosef against Ben Ish Hai. Hakham Obadiah Yosef started, I don't like to call it anti-Ben Ish Hai, but challenging rulings of the Ben Ish Hai already from the 1950s. He came out with it publicly, and because of it, there were public burnings of the Hakham Obadiah Yosef's writings because he came out against the Ben Ish Hai. There were death threats on Hakham Obadiah Yosef because he came out publicly against the Ben Ish Hai, and it was a point where he thought that's it, his life was over.
Why would you want to start from Ben Ish Hai?
Because I think Ben Ish Hai is very practical, and because it, like I said, it revolutionized how halakha is studied as well as how halakha is practiced, because he brought in to the Sephardic communities a lot of both Kabbalah as well as Ashkenazi practice.
Why do you think he might have been bashed early on because they're both Iraqi backgrounds? I mean, does that have anything to do with this?
That's definitely a big part of it. Because he's Iraqi. His father's Iraqi. He's born in Iraq. It's not like he was born, to Iraqi parents, 20, 30 years later. No, his parents are from Iraq. He was from Iraq. They settled.
The most major posek prior to him, and this is retrospect because of the 1950s, no one knew that he was going to be the what he became. You
No,
know,
of course
prior to
not.
them, it was Ben Ish Chai was the latest Chacham
Praise.
that wrote for us.
So, right, so the Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi Yosef Hayim, passed away in 1909. Hakham Obadiah Yosef was born in 1920. So basically, somebody like his father, Hakham Obadiah Yosef's father, okay, knew the Ben Ish Chai, heard the Ben Ish Chai live on a regular basis. Okay, everybody from Hakham Obadiah Yosef's time period knew of the Ben Ish Chai because they either studied with him or their teacher studied with him. He was, an icon. The picture that we see of him, all these people saw him walking down the street that way. They knew his family. They were related, not obviously, wasn't related to the Ben Ish Chai, but I'm saying so many people were interrelated, to one another. The Baghdadian Jewish community was a very ancient one, and there were a lot of, types of different connections and different clans and different hierarchy within their community. And when they began to move to Jerusalem, they moved as a community, not as individuals. And then when they lived in Jerusalem, they were living together as a Baghdadian community in Jerusalem. All the more religious people. You had the poorer people in one area, the richer people in another area, but for the most part, they were together. So now here he is, this young kid, okay, from a simple Baghdadian family, coming out and lashing out, if you will, to the masses, it would sounded to be, against our greatest, holy rabbi, who came from a wealthy family as well. So now you're talking about somebody who has money, and somebody who has chokhmah, and somebody who has rabbinic connection through his father, Rabbi Moshe Hayim, as well as his teacher, the great Rabbi Abdullah Somech, who was one of the greatest Hachamim of Baghdadian Jewry. And now who is this little Obadiah Yosef guy, Abdullah Yusuf Abdullah, that comes along now to talk out against the Ben Ish Chai? He thinks he knows Halakha better than Ben Ish Chai, So it created a major, major stir. And all the people that were students of the Ben Ish Chai, or that their fathers were students of the Ben Ish Chai, they were really, really, going crazy. And they were out for blood. They were out to defend their rabbi's name. So it was a major issue going on in Jerusalem, in the 40s, and it's been more in the 50s than any other time. Because thinking in the 40s, Hakham Obadiah Yosef was still in Porat Yosef. From 47 to 50, he was in Cairo. Then he came back to Jerusalem in what do you call it, in the 50s, in 1950 rather, and then he started teaching. And as he started teaching Ben Ish Chai and rebuttaling, what was written in Ben Ish Chai if he felt it went against Shulchan Aruch.
Where did the Ben Ish Chai study or get semicha, or do we know that?
His father, and from he got it from his father and from Rabbi Abdullah Somech.
So it wasn't the Porat Yosef or some connection to that.
The Ben Ish Chai, the Ben Ish Chai was born and raised and lived and died all in Iraq. Because of his input, Porat Yosef was created.
I see. Okay.
Okay. Yosef Shalom, who lived in Calcutta, India, had a seriously sick amount of money that he wanted to invest in building a hospital in Jerusalem. And he wrote to the Ben Ish Chai telling him his idea. And the Ben Ish Chai said, it's a beautiful idea, but we don't need a hospital for the body. We need a hospital for the neshama. I want you to build instead a yeshiva, the biggest and greatest Sephardic yeshiva in the world. I want you to build it in Yerushalayim and call it under your name.
Okay.
Fact. This is a fact. His name was Yosef Shalom, and he called it Pura Yosef.
Nice.
Okay, so the Pura Yosef came about because of the input of Rabbi Yosef Hayim. Anyway, so as I was saying, I want to move into Ben Ish Hai with Hakham Obadiah Yosef. We'll have to figure out how we're going to do it. If we're going to start from the beginning and just keep going forward, halakha by halakha, or we're going to do week by week based upon the topic in the Ben Ish Hai. We'll figure it out together. But
Which volume are we going to use? Because I know in the past, especially when we talked about the halakha regarding bicycle riding, there were things that were cut out and stuff like that. Is there a specific, or you just how are we going to do that?
I'll explain to you very simply. The bicycle riding issue is brought up in the Rabbi Alim. It's not brought up in his Ben Ish Hai. That's number one. The
Okay.
Ben Ish Hai, for the most part, even though there are various editions of it, the differences are minor.
Okay.
Okay? So really, any Ben Ish Hai volume will do. Everybody should have one, and it doesn't make a difference which one you want to buy. If you want to buy,
I have one.
specific-
I have one. I just didn't know if.
Yeah, no, you don't need a specific one.
Okay.
David, hand me this one over here. This one is, we'll call it the most exact, if you will, based upon the original edition and as well as various manuscripts. This version seems to be the most authentic and most complete.
To the camera.
I'll show it to the camera. Here we go. This edition was edited by Rabbi Yosef Hayim Mizrahi, and it was issued by our friend Yeshua Salem Books on Rehob Yafo. Okay, we'll right across the street from Mahane Yehuda. You could bring any version, bring it with translation.
Yeah, I already have. Okay.
But I think, yeah, there are like I said, there's been so many different editions of the Ben Ish Hai, but I think everybody should have one. And you can mark it up. We could discuss it. There are different compilations of where Hakham Obadiah Yosef differs with the Ben Ish Hai. We'll figure out how we're going to take it, but I think it's an important thing to do. I hope everybody's online, to do this. I think we're all going to benefit in many, many ways. It's going to help us understand the development of halakha, how we practice halakha, how minhagim have changed. I think there's so many positive aspects that will come out of it. And that's basically it. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. Sorry we have such a light crowd tonight.
Sometimes a light crowd is better. I'm sure we'll get a lot of viewers during the week, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, no, I think we will. And I think as we do the Ben Ish Hai, we're going to get even more. I think just the name Ben Ish Hai and Hakham Obadiah Yosef, the two names together, are going to get a lot, garnish a lot of interest. All right.
All right, guys. Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.